What is going on, everybody? This is Eric here from ParaFlinch, and welcome to another video of ours. Today we've got our top 5 picks for Portland Regionals here October 27th, 2018. This is the first expanded regionals of the season, and the meta is all over the place right now. We don't know what is the right choice, but we have an idea of what the top 5 picks are. Today I'm joined by Paulo, who will be doing more content for ParaFlinch in the future. And first off, I'm just gonna go on to the first pick here, and Paulo's gonna take it right out of the gate. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Paulo Amaro. I got my first invite last season after playing on and off for about 5 years. I'm excited for this season because I'm going to go for my second invite, and I'll hope to see everyone in DC this year. Portland's my first regionals because I'm on the West Coast. So let's get into our top 5 picks. The first one on this list is Zorak Garbodor. I believe this is the best deck in format, and I believe Eric does too. I think this will probably be one of the, if not the most popular deck at the tournament as well. It's essentially, the idea comes from the Zorak deck that dominated so much last season, except it uses the Garbatox and Garbodor to hex your opponent out instead of Hex, which is obviously banned. It uses Bursting Balloon and Klefki to enable that, but it also runs 1 to 2 red card, and it even runs Delinquent in most of the lists, although I have seen lists without Delinquent. Additionally, it runs Dowsing Machine, but essentially, I mean, it uses Zorak's insane damage cap and its insane draw engine, especially with Execute, to just pummel over your opponent, and it's actually really nice to lose Hex in a way, because at the cup that I top 4'd at, which Eric made the finals of, and we both lost to Ben Potter. At that cup, I ran 1 red card, 1 delinquent, but those were just the best cards in the deck for me. It's just insane what you can get off sometimes early game. There was one mirror where I went first and turned 2 red card delinquented, and that was just it. I mean, it does have. It has like all of the tools that Zorak does. It can be inconsistent at times because you're running the cards like red card and delinquent, and if you miss your Bridget, you can just lose sometimes. Additionally, a big reason not to play Zorak at this tournament is that Zorak mirrors are awful. Essentially, for the most part, if you go second, you lose, and if you want to dodge that, you either have to be a really top-tier Zorak player, really confident in your list and choice, or you play a different deck. So moving on to the matchups, it's favored against non-Zorogarb Zorak variants because it has the disruption setup, the fact that you can red card delinquent, and the god combo for this deck is really you red card, then you delinquent, and then you play Skyfield back down. You double or triple propagate depending on how many eggs you run, and you fill up your bench, and then you attach Bursting Balloon or Klefki to your Garbodor, and you take a 210 HP knockout while your opponent is at 1 card and has no abilities. So I mean, that beats everything if you get it right. But so that's why, especially against Zorak, it's favored against other Zorak variants. Obviously, Trevenant, especially if you run the Oranguru, it can be difficult because you're not running the Giratina that other Zorak decks are running, but it's still very beatable. And Night March as well, especially if you decide to put in the Oricorio into this list. As for unfavorable matchups, Baby Buzz Shrine is probably the biggest counter to the deck. I wouldn't play Baby Buzz at Portland, though, because I feel like it doesn't actually have that many matchups outside of its Zorak matchups, which are great, but say you hit, I don't know, anything else on this list. Sableye, for example. Sableye knocks off all your energies. Trevenant is just an auto loss. Night March even can give you a rough time. I wouldn't really consider Baby Buzz Shrine, although I understand, especially in a smaller cup meta where you can see all of these Zoraks, or Buzzrock can also be a favorable matchup. That's when I would really only choose to play Baby Buzz Shrine Expanded. Archie's Choice is also a really bad matchup. The newer lists run Order Pad, and they get about 85% of the time a turn 1 Blastoise, which is insane. Archeostoises would be really, really good if it weren't for Trashalinch, which completely just knocks the deck over, but it still is really scary for any Zoroark deck to see. And Sableye, it can be very, very tough, especially, again, if you're not running Oranguru. However, with the Guru, you get to recycle, and then you kind of try to do a very long game of chain where you basically try to fit in a red card delinquent every like third turn or so, and then you rotate between resource management and taking knockouts with Zoroark. So it's a very, very tough matchup to play on the Zoroark side. It's winnable, but very, very skill intensive for the Zoroark Garbodor player, and they have to know how to execute their game plan on a turn-by-turn basis. Going into text for the deck, I do think every list for this deck should be running Delinquent, but I know I've seen some that don't. So Delinquent is a very, very strong tech for the deck just because you can guard block while delinquenting and just completely destroy your opponent's setup. Again, at the Cup, in I think it was round 4 or something, it was basically a win-in, I think. I just completely steamrolled with a turn 2 red card delinquent. Resource Management Oranguru I would also recommend in the list, just because, especially going into a regional, you don't know what you're going to see. There could be someone who decides, I'm going to play Wailord because I hate everyone. And so they do, and if you see that, it just really sucks. And it's also just really good against Drompagarb as well, because it lets you recycle the DCEs that they desperately Righteous Edge off of you. And it also helps you get back things like Dowsing Machine and other items that help you a lot in that matchup. Additionally, you can play 1 copy of Trashalinch Garbodor and 1 copy of Psychic Energy. Because of the triple trade engine that this deck runs on, it shouldn't be actually too hard to find the Garbodor and the Psychic, but the problem is space in this deck more, because if you decide for those 2 slots, you're not running the second red card, which is really strong. You probably still want to fit the Delinquent, but you're probably not running Oranguru. This list is so tight that it's really hard to fit in Trashalinch Garbodor. However, in my testing with it, it is annoying in matchups, say against Garbodor, where I'm not going to need the Trashalinch, or not the Trashalinch, the Garbotoxin ever. And so I kind of just put a Trubbish down for the sake of the 20 damage on the Zoroark, and that kind of can suck. But the 1 Trashalinch Garbodor can be good against decks such as the Baby Buzz Garb deck that you might see pop up.
Alright, I'm going to talk about Zoroark Alolan Muck. I recently took this to second place finish at the recent Portland League Cup, losing to Ben Potter, who is playing Drompagarb. We will talk about Drompagarb. That is a strong deck, as we've already mentioned. But Zoroark Alolan Muck, it's really, really strong. I mean, it's trying to copy past Zoroark variants before the bans. But it does have other ways to get cards faster now in this format with Mag Cargo. So I'll get to that as soon as we go through the advantages and the disadvantages. It's still fast. It's a Zoroark engine, right? So you're just digging through your deck, getting all the cards that you need to go against whatever matchup goes your way. Like I have here, it has a lot of answers. So it's basically playing Zoroark Alolan Muck is just finding the right answers to the deck you're playing against when you need them. You have things like Mag Cargo, and you have that's really it. You just have Mag Cargo, and if you set up 2 Mag Cargos and 2 Zoroarks, you're literally getting everything you could ever want and more. And it's pretty crazy if you can get your engine up, which is not too hard to do. The disadvantage is our early disruption really does hurt. So if you get red carded, if you hit the Sableyes or you hit the Zoroark Garbodors and they red card you and they get their combo off, it can hurt really, really badly. And as I have here, if you don't set up, it hurts really, really bad as well. I put like no win 85% of the time if you don't set up, because this deck, like I have here, says it has a lot of answers, and it does, but that means your early hands can clunk up. I've seen multiple times in testing where your opening hand is like 2 Zoruas, and then you just have a bunch of other garbage like 4 VS Seekers, 2 DCEs. I mean, like, that's exaggerating, right? But I mean, like I said, I mean, it's just hitting the turn 1 Lele or the turn 1 Bridget, and then getting your board established, and then getting a draw supporter for the next turn, and then you're pretty much good to go. But other than that, I do think this deck is really, really strong. It's either my top pick for Portland or top second pick for sure. So going into the matchups, I put favorable here. I think Drampa Garb is more favorable just because I think it's very slightly, though. It's probably like 55-45, even though I did lose to Ben Potter. I lost to him in sudden death, by the way. So we had to flip a coin. He won the coin flip, and he ended up winning by attaching 2 DCEs to a Lele and Guzmaing up at the end. One of my, I was not benching any Zoruas or anything, but he ended up Guzmaing out like my, I think it was Oricorio, I believe. I think that, or was that 70? I can't remember. It was one of those guys.
90, I think. But
is it 90? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. It was something that was like 80 or 70 HP. But yeah, so I think it has a really strong matchup. If I had more time, I think I would have won the series. But just because you have Mag Cargo, if you get Mag Cargo established, they can Righteous Edge you, but you have 1 Zoroark and 1 Mag Cargo, you're pretty much good to go to get that DCE back, or to get a Colress back, or to get a Skyfield back. I mean, it's all right there in the engine. You know, I have Muck here, really, but it really should be Zoroark and Mag Cargo, but Alola Muck is really it's the saving grace.
It's the enabler.
Yeah, it literally saves you because everyone's playing Sudowoodo now. So it's that big of a card that it's established as Zoroark, Alola Muck. So so moving on from Drampa Garb, yes, Drampa Garb can disrupt you, and they have a lot of ways to disrupt you with Righteous Edge, Parallel, and Garbotoxin, etc. However, if you're smart with your plays, what you can do is with Mag Cargo, you can set a Field Blower up on top of your deck, and basically you have to force them to end you. They have to get that combo every single time, which can be a struggle for them. So moving on to the next point here, we have Trevenant. Just like Paulo said in Zoroark, Garbodor, Zoroark is pretty strong, especially if you have Tina promo. You can pretty much steamroll through Trevenant. You got to remember they're a stage 2 deck. So having them set up, even under item lock, you should be fine just because you're a Zoroark deck. You're hitting them for weakness. If they end up red carding you early in the game, that could be a big problem, like I said earlier, but for the most part, you should be fine, especially if you run Tina promo. That's just extra insurance. You're definitely favored in that matchup for sure. And then Night March, even more than Zoroark, Garbodor. This is just guaranteed. You don't even need to worry about them hitting Field Blow or whatever. If you get the Muck down, their Marshadow's done, and they have to attack with the babies. So it's pretty dang favored for you, I'd have to say, especially if you're playing Oricorio as well. Like, you should just be fine. Like Paulo said, I don't expect much Night March. There will be people that play it for sure.
Definitely, I think it could be a potentially good play, but you have to be good with the deck, and also you have to kind of avoid certain decks. Like, I wouldn't be happy to see a Drampa Garb or even a Dimension Valley Garb as a Night March going into Portland.
Right. Yeah, and we expect to see a lot of those, so that kind of scares me away from Night March, but it is what it is. And unfavorable matchups, same Baby Buzz Shrine. That deck, it's very unfavored. Now, I did play it in top 4 at the League Cup, and I 2-0'd the guy. Just because at the time, our local area, there was at least 3 or 4 Baby Buzz Shrines, and I knew it from the League Cup that I hosted. As you guys probably know if you watch this channel's videos, you can see that I streamed it, and top 8 was 2 Baby Buzz Shrines, and there was at least a couple more there. So I knew that going into this, I had to have some way to go against Baby Buzz Shrine and not just be a complete auto loss, because if I didn't see him in Swiss, I guaranteed myself that I was going to see it in Top Cut, and sure enough, I did. And my tech option for that day was adding in 2 weakness policies. So I would smooth over with Mag Cargo, put a weakness policy there, going into the Sledgehammer turn, attach. Also mixed with Acerola, it makes it super hard for them. They can't hit their big knockout turn, and really that's what wins you the game with Zoroark, Alola, Mag Cargo. However, going into Portland, I don't know if teching in 2 weakness policy is worth it. It's probably not. I don't know. I have to think about it. I'd have to go and take a look. But those 2 slots are really, really, they're worth a lot. And as we'll talk about in the tech options, it might just not be worth it overall. But going on to the next one, we have Sableye Garbodor. Again, just as Paulo said, I know I keep reiterating that, but he really did hit all the points here. Sableye Garbodor is a problem, specifically if they get that combo off turn 1. Like I said, turn 1 red card is just the bane of your existence. You just gotta pray and hope that in that red card that you, if they go first, you just pray that you get your access to Bridget and then maybe a Chorus for next turn. That is your absolute, you just hope that that happens, and it's super, super hard, right? Because they're going to be controlling what your top deck is now that they have Hiker and all this nonsense. It's crazy, but yeah. And then the last one I have here is Giratina Malamar. If they hit you with that combo early on, and you don't have any DCE on board, it can suck. And if you don't play Ranger, it's a huge problem. This is a Zoroark deck, obviously, and you only run 4 DCE, just like Zoroark Garbodor. It's a huge problem. I keep saying huge here, but a huge thing that you could do in any Zoroark deck right now is include Ranger. I feel like the meta is so, it's so cloudy right now that people are just going to come in here with Chaos Wheel decks and just feel like, oh, I'm going to have a great time because people aren't going to be teching in Ranger. I feel like if you are a Zoroark deck and you only run 4 DC, you absolutely should be playing Ranger. I know it seems like a card. I hear a lot of people always say, like, Ranger is not a good card. I always regret it every time I put it in. And I agree with them. Every time I put in Ranger, it was completely worthless. It was a dead card every single time. I was happy to get rid of it whenever I saw it. But it might just be something that you have to run. A lot of people are going towards this Giratina Malamar deck, and honestly, Giratina Malamar, if nobody plays Ranger and the field is flooded with Zoroarks just for DCE, they might just have a free tournament almost. But yeah, that's just my advice there. And going into the tech cards, as I have Pokemon Ranger poking out from the corner there, it's an idea, and I think if you're playing Zoroark, it's a huge consideration for you. But as I said, cutting the weakness policies for other cards might be worth it in the long run, especially since spread is such a huge talked about discussion right now with Dimension Valley, Zoroark, Tapu Koko spread, and the new fairy, or not the new fairy, the new psychic Tapu Lele. Max Potion is a good card. It will save you in these matchups. So considering Max Potion for sure is a good consideration. Xerosic. So depending on how many field blowers you run, you may want to choose to include Xerosic here, because Drampa Garbodor is going to be huge in the meta, and having access to many accesses to field blower is going to be helpful to you. You really want to have your trades and your Mag Cargo running. It may even be worth it to you to run 3 field blower and 1 Xerosic. So in theory, if you have all 4 of your VS Seekers right, you could have 7 outs to field blower, and if you're running Dowsing Machine, even more. So yeah, I mean, if you're expecting tons of Garb, I would consider Xerosic. As well, it discards special energy, so it's not just for Pokemon Tool cards, it's also for, you know, special energy. So you're not a Zoro lock deck, but you have that option as well. Another card here, we have Seismitoad EX. This is a great card. This is something I included in this early inclusion in my deck of Zoroark, Magcargo, and Muck. It's great if you start it and you start Quaking Punch early and denying your opponent items, but other than that, you'll mostly just find it as sitting on your bench and giving you more damage output for your Zoroarks. However, like I said, though, if you start it, you can see some huge payoff with Seismitoad. I mean, item lock is huge, and I think you should be playing Acerola if you do play Zoroark, Alolan Muck, Magcargo, just because it's such a strong card. I don't think I'll ever play this deck without Acerola, and you can always just save the Seismitoad, keep looping it if you need to. It also gives you some time to set up your Zoroark, so it's an option. And with that, I will moving on over to Paulo to talk about Trampa Garbodor. All right, actually, I'm gonna start off talking about Trampa Garbodor. Trampa Garb, like I said, is a very strong deck. Lost to it at the finals in the last League Cup. It has that well-known disruption, the triple disruption, where you get the parallel for some of those matchups. Parallel, Garbotoxin, and Righteous Edge. You can remove Parallel there to make it that triple. The Parallel's just there for those Zoroark matchups. It's very strong, and these Trampa Garb players will mostly get this off 75-80% of the time when they need to. They just have the options. It's very, very powerful, and it's a very consistent lock. And the disadvantages are your draw engine is basically living off of your top decks and your supporters that you get. And in a sense, it will clunk itself just because of that and its very own nature. Moving on to the matchups, Night March and Seismitoad. Well, I mean, Night March is the same, right? Righteous Edge is a huge problem for the deck. They have to keep recycling their DCE. Same with Seismitoad, right? And they can only do that for so long, and the amount of items that they go through as well is a huge problem for them. So Garbodor is just going to be sweeping games for you. And same with Archie's Stoice, right? They use a lot of items. Righteous Edge does not matter, obviously, because all they play is basic water. However, Garb's just going to sweep all these games for you, just from the amount of items alone that they play. Problems for this deck are the Buzzrock heavy supporter line deck, like Xander Pero played to win Renoke. It can just overpower you. They don't need to play that many items. They can just play a few and just steamroll through your deck. And if they get Lycanroc up without many items, then they're doing good. So, and Trevenant is a huge problem for the deck as well. If they set up on you and they item lock you, like I said, this deck can clunk itself up in a sense, and they can just keep spreading, and it's just gonna look bad for you. So, moving on to the. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that the matchups compared to at least everything else, it seems like, oh, these aren't really the most relevant matchups here, at least for the favorable side. One thing to note is that it's one of Drompagarb's main strengths is that it's really good against things that you're not entirely expecting. And going into Portland, where it's really a blind expanded regional, it can be a very, very good tool to have, like the ability to Garb and like a Guardy that you might see, or I guess Gardevoir is not a good example, but like a deck that you're not expecting, Garbodor and Drompa are a very good combination to deal with that.
I'd agree. Going into the tech options, this is something that I wouldn't say it if Ben didn't post his list, but he did, so I got to talk about it. He played Tauros and Ninja Boy. Kind of cool. If we're expecting a lot of Buzzwole, Lycanroc because it won the last regionals, and people are like, hey, it won the last regionals, I don't think much has changed, I'm just going to bring that deck, that Tauros will probably be a good option for you. You can really start to put tons of pressure on them if they just start jet punching you willy-nilly, and then if they're attacking into a Trubbish or whatever, you can Ninja Boy into that and take maybe a cheeky Mad Bull GX on them. Or actually, that wouldn't get the knockout. If they did 50s, I don't know. I'm thinking of math with Diancie, whatever.
It can happen.
It can happen. It can happen for sure. But I mean, Tauros is good. There's people that disagree, but I generally think it's pretty good. You have to worry about what you're attacking into. Once you see the Ninja Boy or the Tauros, your opponent's like, oh man, do I even hit into this thing? Like, I know he's got it, so like, well, what do I do? It can be a headache for you, especially when you already have enough of a headache with Drampa Garbodor as itself. So it could be a huge problem. And then we also have Delinquent. Delinquent's just a good card in this deck. Typically, you want to be running like 3 or 4 Parallel City, and just being able to delinquent your opponent when they're not keeping track of what they have in their hand, or keeping track how many cards they have in their hand. You can just demolish them and just steamroll them after you just obliterate their hand. So really good card, just more disruption. This deck is just like there's threats everywhere, and if you don't respect the deck and respect what's in it, you could pretty much just get overtaken pretty quickly. So yeah.
And so on top of those techs, I want to discuss the Banette GX for a moment, just because it's a psychic type that is uniquely not psychically. So it can be really good in the mirror. Additionally, versus Buzzrock, sometimes you find that your Drampas, because they're fighting weak, it's really hard to actually do much early game. And if they're smart about not burning their items, sometimes you can just straight up lose to Buzzrock, and it can feel really bad. So Banette gives you an additional cushion attacker for that matchup.
So the third deck on our list is Sableye Garbodor. It's completely different than the last time that we saw it, which the last time we saw it was when it won Utah for the most part. But it's really different because of 1, the Puzzle of Time ban, and 2, the Gethsis ban, and 3, the addition of Hiker, which gives it a whole new combo to play with. Essentially what it did before was kind of just like stall your opponent out by disrupting energy, and then picking up Life Dew every turn that they take a knockout, and kind of giving them an infinite loop and doing a slower deck out. But the list, I believe, still played Handiwork and stuff like heavier hammers. However, the newer list, it revolves mostly around the combo of Trick Shovel and Hiker, which basically allows you to, say you use Ace Trainer, and then your opponent whiffs a draw, you have them Garb locked. You put them at 4 cards after their draw, and they're Garb locked, and they don't have the best hand. Essentially, what you do from there is you just Trick Shovel if your opponent has a card you want them to have off the top, which is a bad card. You just leave it there. If they have a card that you don't want them to have, you discard it, and then you Hiker, and you put a card that you do want them to have on top. And so it's more of a hand disruption deck now. So it's a really, really good lock if you can get it off. The problem is that it's very frail, it can be inconsistent, and it is item dependent as well. So Toad can be really hard, for example. You have to find your Flare Grunt in that matchup. Additionally, it's weak to stuff like red cards still. So if you run into Zoroark, don't think it's an auto win for the Sable Guard player. It isn't really, especially if they're running the Oranguru. It's very difficult. Another disadvantage is that it's a really difficult deck to play, and it's very, very, boring, honestly. It sucks kind of to sit across from your opponent and you're literally just rigging their top deck and saying go, and your opponent looks at their top deck and they're just really annoyed, and then they pass, and then you do it again for like 30 turns until the end of the game. And that's essentially the game plan for the deck. So you really have to be patient to be able to play this deck. So as for his matchups, it really can be everything outside of Trevenant and Groudon just as a baseline if it draws well. the main problem is stuff such as red card and just kind of a bad draw. So that's what's really scary about the deck, because if you lose game 1, you're not going to pull out the match. And on the other side, your opponent at any point, if they decide they're out of the game, they can just scoop and go into game 2, and they can, for example, win game 2 and 3. So it's the problem with running any mill deck, but especially decks such as Sableye that plays such a long game lock. You have to be, again, very confident in your choice to bring Sablegarb to Portland, because you have to really know what you're doing and really be able to sit at the table and hiker your opponent for 30 straight turns, literally. Because it's such a disruptive deck, especially with the ability to junk hunt, you can really name any item or supporter as a tech. But as for Pokemon, the main tech would be Latias EX. It has the ability Bright Down, which just immediately wins versus Trevenant, because they literally don't... The only damage they can do against Latias EX is the Lele promo's Psy Wave for 20 damage. So if you're genuinely worried about Trevenant and you're planning on bringing Sableye, you should definitely consider playing Latias EX. So the final deck on this list is Groudon. And so what Groudon does is it essentially just sticks a Wobbuffet active, it uses Tropical Beach and Primals Up, and just slowly attaches to its Groudon until you build one up and you heal it off. You can play Wishing Baton, essentially just a bunch of different tools that keep your 248 HP tank that can't be targeted by items or supporters. And it's really good against the current meta, because it's very good against specifically Zoroark and Garbodor, because those two decks don't have consistent ways to actually deal 240, and Groudon can often deal with their chip damage and swing back for over 200 damage. The problem with the deck is that it is very slow and it can be very inconsistent. Some games you start your Groudon EX and then you just have a bunch of your tech cards, especially tools, because of Groudon's, what's it called? It's not an ability, but its trait, that's what it's called. It's Ancient Trait. There's a ton of tools in the deck, and a lot of the tools are unusable if you don't have a Groudon actually set up. So it can be very inconsistent, even with 4 Tropical Beach in the list. And another disadvantage is obviously that you need 4 Tropical Beach for the deck. There's no reason to play the deck without 4 Tropical Beach, so you also need to have access to those, whether it's a friend that'll let you borrow them or buy them, although I would not purchase Tropical Beach right now. Like I said earlier, the main advantage is the fact that it's favored against Zoroark and Drompagar. Additionally, any disruption deck, you're essentially 100% against them, unless you play pretty badly, but it's pretty easy to not lose to those decks. Versus Wailord, you do have to keep in mind the Xurkitree GX, which is, like today I was testing and I hit Wailord on TCGO, and I did lose because I did not manage my energy correctly to deal with a Zerk. But either way, it's very good against any mill decks or stall decks, because you just can not get your energy removed and you just kind of clean up with one Groudon or even a Regirock in some cases. However, it is unfavored against Buzzrock and Baby Buzz Shrine. Specifically, the Buzzrock matchup can be helped a lot with the tech of Mr. Mime. I didn't include Trevenant because a tech that most lists should be including is actually a Bent Spoon, which prevents all effects of opponent's attacks, which means they cannot damage you with Trevenant Break's Silent Fear, and it really lets you like mow them down as well. However, Baby Buzz Shrine, any Shrine deck, is really, really hard for the deck to deal with just because Groudon's so slow, and so poke damage is really difficult to deal with. The fact that specifically Baby Buzz Shrine lists force you to take 6 individual prizes, Groudon really can't keep up with that. You probably have to rely on Regirock in those matchups, but Regirock only has 110 HP, so it can be very difficult versus any Shrine or Spread deck. And so moving on to the tech options, there's Bent Spoon, which again, it's almost entirely for the Trevenant matchup. It also has like some off usage against like various things that do special conditions. I used it against like the Psychic Alolan Grimer that poisons, but that was not that was just on an active wall while I was stalling out. You can play Mr. Mime, which could be a very good call for spread decks, and Buzzrock, because Buzzrock does rely on using Jet Punch to take knockouts on Groudon to weaken it. Additionally, you can play Gold Potion, which is an awesome tech. I played Gold Potion once at a tournament in 2013 when I was a senior. It was in the old school Cling Clang deck, and it was awful, so it's fun to be able to play one of the traditionally worst ace specs outside of the black and white Kyurem tools. So it's nice. However, computer search is a great utility for the deck because it lets you search early for your beach off of a Karina. However, the Gold Potion is really cool to play. Additionally, your ace spec could even be Scramble Switch, which is also a great fun play to do. And so those are our top 5 deck choices for Portland. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll pass it back off to Eric.
Alright guys, thanks for checking us out. Thanks for watching to the end if you did. Obviously you did if you're here. And if you're going to Portland, let us know what you guys are thinking about playing. Get the discussion going in the comments. If you like the video, please leave a like. And sharing is always caring. We always appreciate that. And subscribe for more content. It is on the way, I promise. And I am personally thinking about taking Zorak Muck again. That seems to be the deck that is calling my name, as it were. So if you're going to Portland, let us know. Hopefully we'll see you there. And until next time, keep it cool, keep it safe, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.